Hey everyone, welcome to our live stream. Welcome to the celebration, I would say, of this classic film by Mike Nichols, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which stars. Oh, you have the Blu-ray,
Of
I should
course.
say. Or
It's my
is it a
baby.
Blu-ray or it's a
It's a
DVD?
Blu-ray. Yeah.
Blu-ray. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's so great. So
Yay.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf stars Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, and there are two more supporting actors. I can't remember. Like
Sandy
they aren't
Dennis and
very
George Segal.
okay. Yes, like those actors aren't that famous compared to Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, right?
Well, Sandy Dennis did a few things, and then she died in like the early '90s. And then
Okay.
George Segal, I believe is how you say it. He was in a lot of stuff, and he died like I think exactly 10 years after Elizabeth Taylor, which is interesting. But he's been in a lot of stuff as well. But of course,
Mhm.
everyone remembers Richard Burton and
Oh,
Elizabeth
okay.
Taylor mostly. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Okay, that's great. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's get deep dive into the film, Matt. So, when did you watch this film for the first time ever? And like, what was your thoughts regarding this when you first watched this film? And compared to you've mentioned that you have obviously watched the play, but we'll talk about that later in
Yeah.
the video. But let's first talk about the film when you rewatched it. How was your experience like? Just let me know about it.
So the first time I watched it, it was recommended by a friend in college, and we were like up partying all night. I was drinking, I was smoking. I was out of my mind, and I was like on the verge of going to sleep. And then they were like, "Let's watch this." I was like, "Okay." Turned it on, and I could not stop looking at it. I was so fascinated. I loved the dialogue, the performances. It was just everything I needed at that moment, and I just thought it was incredible. And I watched the entire thing, and it was like at like 3 in the morning, and I was just glued to the TV. And I've seen it.
But just wanted to cut you out. Like, what age were you in when you watched this film for the first time? At
Where?
what age? At what age?
Oh, I was probably like 18, 19. I think 19
Oh,
maybe.
okay.
Yeah, I was
Hmm.
19. And I've seen it a bunch since then because anytime someone wants to watch it, I'm like, sure, let's do it because I fucking love it. And I watched it recently with some friends who had never seen it, and they had like a whole room set up like a cinema, which is really cool. And we watched it in there, and it was fantastic. And I've seen it a bunch. I've seen the play on Broadway. Yeah, I'm obsessed with it. I think it's just magnificent, and I love. I also related to a lot of energy that the two were giving to each other sometimes, of like with certain friendships or even like relationships with like family and friends, and just how combative people can be, just even like under the aspect, like even if they love each other, there's still some weird toxic kind of things that happen. So but yeah, this was your first time watching it?
Absolutely. This was my first time watching it, but I only remembered the name of the lead characters, I would say, George and Martha, because I think in Mad Men, there's an episode where this guy, Donald Draper and Lane Price, both are played by, um, I think who's playing that guy? I
John
just
Hamm
forgot.
is Donald Draper. Yeah.
Yes, John Hamm and Richard Harris. They both play the characters, and in one scene there's a scene where they are in a stand-up comedy. They are attending a stand-up comedy set, and like
Oh
the
yes,
stand-up comedian teases them. Oh, look at them, George and Martha.
I just watched that episode too because my roommate's watching it with me. I've never seen the show, so we're watching it. But I just saw that the other day too. That's so funny. Yeah.
So from that I got to know that okay, what's George and Martha, and in India, Amazon Prime Video has the streaming rights for Mad Men. So I just found out in their X-ray thing that George and Martha is referred to as the lead characters from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So I would like, okay, let's watch it. It's kind of like how Matt like those films, like you, because because like you love all those dialogue heavy films. I think Hong Sang-soo's films are very dialogue
Mhm.
heavy, and that's the reason I think you might have loved this film. So when I watched this film, It first of all it gave me a deja vu of I was watching like I was watching Scenes from Marriage, which was directed and written by Ingmar Bergman. It felt kind of like very similar to that film, because that film also deals with a broken marriage, not from the starting of that, but later on at one point it starts kind of breaking it. Obviously Scenes from Marriage is quite different, like it kind of talks about the divorce kind of divorce part of the film, of the journey of the marriage. Here it's not quite of a divorce kind of a thing as per se, but just one night all hell breaks loose, no holds barred, and whatever happens, it's like no one knows what is happening. Like all secrets are broken, all 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 vows are broken, all secrets are revealed, I would say. And I was in I was like, wow, what am I watching it? Like those dialogues were hitting hard very much to my heart,
Yeah.
because I see, you have watched this film multiple times, you might remember some of the dialogues as well, but I couldn't remember all of the dialogues since I just watched it a few days back. But I don't know, like they were just mentioning back and forth that you said this, you said that, you said this, you we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that. I was like, what the fuck they are talking about? Why are they fighting so much for just silly reasons? And like, why can't they just save the damn marriage? And at one point, they were like, they were part of one team, but still, I was actually rooting for that. Like, oh, okay, at least in one point, they are a team, but like after some moments later, okay, like they just broke it off. I don't know, I just felt bad for that particular couple, and even for that couple who
The
just
younger couple.
visited them. No, both couples,
Oh,
but
but well, yeah, they both have issues.
exactly. But like I felt like I drew comparison to Scenes from Marriage, because the in the Scenes from Marriage film, I think in the starting of the film, all is well with the lead couple. I think I don't remember the names of the actor who played in Scenes from Marriage.
Lee Volman and Erland
And
Josephson. Yeah,
Josephson. Okay,
yeah,
yes. So Liv Ullman's like character and her husband, like it's quite okay for them. And the same kind of thing is happening, similar thing, I would say, similar kind of thing is happening with the younger couple in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Like
yeah,
starting, we were like, okay, everything is good, but later on we find out, okay, they kind of had an abortion, such as I like I'm still confused by it. I don't know about it, but yes, they also had quite differences in their opinion, quite differences in like in their marriage as well. So we later on get to know about it, and that's so great about it, that the film is so much layered, that we only see the conflicts between Richard Burton and Elizabeth Dieter, like George and Martha's marriage. But yes, the second couple as well is quite like the marriage is quite ruined. So I felt bad for both characters. And yes, I like, obviously I would love to like I'd like to ask you as well, what like how did you feel about the dialogues of the film, since you are so much obsessed with like the films which are very much quite of dialogue heavy as well, like I said, Hong Sang-soo or Ingmar Bergman's films as well.
Well, what's great is that it is based off of a play by Edward Albee, and I think that's
Mhm.
where like the dialogue is a huge focus rather than like the cinematography or something. But even in
Mhm.
this, it's great. It's Mike Nichols' first film, and
Yes.
he brings like the intimacy of like a stage play like to the screen, which is a very hard to translate a lot of times. And it's great because in the play they don't leave the house. They never leave the house. It all takes place in the house. And in the movie, we see that they go to the bar. Like some stuff happens outside, but in the play, it's always in the house. But just to go back of like who these people are, George and Martha. They're married. George is the professor um, at a college, and he's a associate professor of history, and he is married to the daughter of the president of that school, who is also very, very intelligent, very witty, and I think that's kind of what brought them together originally. But since we find out, also, are we getting into
Yes,
spoilers?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So before like getting into like the big like reveal, you keep hearing about their son and stuff, and you find out like that they can't have they weren't able to have children, and so they've kind of made up this idea that they have a child, something to keep them together and to keep their marriage together, like a traditional marriage. Like they think that this is what they need. So it's all like about this illusion they're trying to keep up with themselves, because they feel like there's nothing else to their marriage, even though they've clearly been able to keep it alive, just not in a healthy way at all. But in
Not
their
in a,
way,
I would say, American traditional way, so
yeah.
to speak, with the rules of the marriage in the society on the Catholic way, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. And so they kind of like play games with other people, like all these like witty like terrible games with people just to like tear them apart and like ruin the illusion of other people, because they feel like they have themselves figured out, but even they have their own illusion that they're keeping up just to keep them from losing their minds. And so they invite this couple over after having like this like party at the college with everybody in the staff, and they invite the new professor of biology and his young wife. And then they start to kind of like pick and destroy them slowly by like finding little things and using it against them, manipulating them, and doing stuff for their own fun, and just because they don't want to deal with their own issues. So it's fun to watch them try to be like, hey, listen, you're keeping up this act for everybody, but we see through you, blah 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 blah. And in the end they find out just how fucked up they really are. And it's just a journey through the night where they're just constantly drinking, and it just gets worse and worse. And when we're introduced to the George and Martha, they just come home from the thing already not sober. They're already definitely a few drinks in. And then she's like, I have guests coming. And you can see that there is a loving relationship with them, but they bicker at each other. They just kind of like yell at each other throughout the house, which I've been around plenty of married couples that are very similar too. Um, but it seems to be done in like a way that's like joking and fun for a bit. And then once the other people are there, that's when like the performances come out, where they feel like they have to compete against each other in front of these people now that they have an audience. And it's a wild thing. And it's cool that a lot of the dialogue was kept, I think, except for like little curse words they kind of
Mhm.
tweaked here and there, and like a monologue of Martha's, I believe. But otherwise it's basically the play. And you were comparing it to Ingmar Bergman, which is interesting because Ingmar Bergman also directed theater, and that's where like even like his films feel very theatrical as well, because the dialogue ends up being like a huge part of his films, even especially I think in his later works like Autumn Sonata, Scenes from a Marriage, um, even Cries and Whispers, even though I think he gets a little bit more exciting with the cinematography and stuff, thanks to Sven Nykvist, I believe. But yeah, I don't know. Who is there any? Did you find this humorous ever, or the film, or was it just constantly like, oh, this is so fucked up? Because I think it has like a bit of camp, even though it's like grounded in like these people exist, they're out there, and it's nuts. But the dialogue is so bitchy that it's like it can actually be like really like ooh, like it's wild to sit and listen to them like play like words back and forth with each other, and I think that's super fun.
Matt, I don't think I found it funny that kind, like how you found it.
Yeah.
But interesting to say that these current films, like Marriage Story, there are some kind of humor in it. They intentionally put it. Here there wasn't any intentional humor, I would say, because it was plain simple. um, troubled marriage and their consequences. And I found it like that, and only that it was a troubled marriage, and this was the thing which was happening in that particular time and at particular night as well. And interesting to see that I, like through Mad Men, I actually in my Instagram story, I wrote a, a kind of caption that this film kind of revolutionized or changed Hollywood for good, because this was one of those films I read about it, because like these kind of films didn't even exist before. Like like from the cinema, Hollywood cinema, I have seen that these kind of films didn't even exist in Hollywood. Like back and forth, I think disputes between a wife and a husband, because it's kind of very uncatholic about having these kind of disputes between a couple.
Yeah.
So like filmmakers didn't even show these films, these kind of ideas or stories in cinemas back then. So this was a kind of groundbreaking, revolutionizing film. And I think you already mentioned that this film like had some kind of cuss words, some kind of abusive language, but it was being censored like in the last moment.
Yeah, they changed
Ye-
the word like when they open the door to the young couple. She's like,
Mhm.
I think at some point it was like "fuck you," and then it was like "screw
Oh.
you," and then they switched it to "god damn you," which I think is more offensive, especially to like Christians being like because they don't love that word.
Mhm.
So
Correct,
it's
correct.
like I was like they changed "screw" to like that, and you can kind of see it in the film too that it like that's what it originally was, but then it was like "god damn you," and it's like an over like what's the ADR thing
Mhm.
over it. And then like he calls her like George calls Honey, the young woman, like monkey nipples and like other little things here and there, and they kind of go over her head, the character, because she's just like she's very drunk and throwing up like most of the movie. So yeah, it's interesting, and they also filmed it in black and white because both Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton were very young for the roles, and a lot of people were like, "Why are you casting them?" But then they like put on like old age makeup and put it in black and white, even though it didn't need to be because like color was already a thing, color film. But they like wanted to do it like that just so they could appear older. So if you see like pictures of them in like color with the makeup and everything, you see like the lines, the old like kind of like emphasizing the wrinkles and stuff like that. But they do it well. I think Elizabeth Taylor was like in her mid 30s or something when she was doing this. She's basically playing someone in like late 40s, early 50s,
Mhm.
maybe. And then Richard Burton, I think, was mid 40s, playing someone who's like in their like late, like early 50s or something like that. But
Mhm.
it's just fascinating that they chose them and they pulled out these performances. And like, I hate the Oscars and awards and stuff, but like all four of them got nominated, which I think is interesting. All four cast members. It was the first film apparently to get nominated across the board on every element, which I think is just interesting. How it's Mike Nichols' first kind of film, and he got so much like praise. They all got praise for it, and yeah, and it's
Mhm.
still, and I think it's still impactful to this day because you can do this. It can be done kind of like anytime. You could like, even though Edward Albee and the estate likes it to be very specific to its time, but and I think that definitely helps with defending certain parts of their personalities or how they're together, especially with Honey going through her hysterical pregnancy, pretending like it. And that's something we don't know specifically. Like they say that it was a hysterical pregnancy, like it wasn't actually a thing that happened. It was just kind of like in her head. And I think she got bloated and maybe like almost tricked Nick, the younger guy, into the marriage, and he married her because he got her pregnant, and then found out, oh, she's not actually pregnant. Now I'm just married to this woman I kind of had a little thing with, and but her family has money, and George and Martha pick these little details out of their life just to use them against them, and then they're like, oh, remember that hysterical pregnancy you had? And then they're like caught off guard. They're like, haha, we know all your secrets, and just treat them like shit. And it's I think it can be funny depending on the certain things they say, especially, and I think it's just because of like the cleverness behind the things they say to each other because they're both very intelligent people. Like, when he's offering them drinks, he'd be like, "Oh, what would you like?" And she's like, "Oh, I'll have this because I, never mix, never worry. And he's like, okay, great. And Martha, rubbing alcohol for you. And she's like, oh, never mix, never worry. And like these little jabs at each other. And there's one of my favorite lines is like, Martha's going off at George, and he ends up having enough, and he like smashes a bottle of liquor, and she's like, I hope that was an empty bottle, George. You can't you can't afford to waste good liquor, not on an associate professor's salary and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. And they just like are tearing each other apart just because they have an audience. And it's just wild, because I've been in situations being around couples that do that when there's other people around, and I think it's this weird competitive thing with each other where they kind of like alienate each other and use them as like, use their like little things about them as like weapons towards them just to come out on top. And it's this weird competitive thing, I think, between men and women in general, but like people in relationships do it all over. But
But this was greatly portrayed in The Office. It's a the US version of Office. I don't think you have seen it.
what
It's
characters?
yes. So it like the the husband kind of guy was played by Steve Carell,
Oh, Michael
and
Scott.
Michael Scott. That's
Okay.
and
I've never seen the full show. I've seen a few episodes though.
yes. So and the like think Martha's character, I would say, was portrayed by Jan Levinson, the character in Office.
Okay.
So yes, they were feeling like the guests which were invited at that evening were
Yeah.
kind of feeling uncomfortable that where the fuck are we, because like where are we, why are we here, because everyone was like okay, like I think Michael Scott and Jan were making their guests uncomfortable by playing with each other, like just we should do this, we should do that, but
Oh, they
the
invite them
opposite.
over to their house or something, their
Yes,
apartment. Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, they invite them over there to their house for a dinner, and they start with a karaoke, but the opposite sex doesn't agree with what the husband, like the wife is the wife is not agreeing with the husband what he's doing, and it is happening back and forth, and it kind of felt like George and Martha's relationship right now,
On
which
that
they were.
on that episode of The Office, do they have like, though I don't know like the characters' relationship much, but do they have like moments like George and Martha where you see that there is like this loving sort of situation underneath all the bullshit craziness? Like, is there a
Yes,
bit of that? Because I know they show it in this film. So yeah.
there is actually, but it's like it's just for that particular moment and that particular episode only. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't last for the entire show or the entire season as well. Like
Yeah, and that's what's cool in the movie is like right before the guests come over, you see them like they get on the bed because they're both kind of drunk and stuff, and then they're like playing with each other, and they keep doing the like punchline of the joke they heard at the party, the "Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf," and which I was reading about as well, which is based off of like Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, and of like these illusions that we put on for people, and kind of like what happens when those are gone, and like what's left is just the bare like marriage, like the bare bones of this relationship, instead of like these illusions that society has put on us and all these other things, which is like they've created their own illusion with the sun. And we find out at the end that it is not a real sun, that they've just created this baby boy, and they both have their own like ideas of what it is, but they share it together to have like this thing that they were never able to have. And that's why they've never left each other, is because they've done this. And we see Martha crosses the line by I think they both clearly cross the line with each other, because he becomes very abusive in the bar when she's dancing with Nick, doing her like thrusting and stuff, and what is it she says? She's like, oh, encourage me or something, while she's like on top of him, and it's so insane. And then he slams her against the car outside, and they have a whole like amazing fight, like as in the dialogue and everything. And then she goes home to her place and fucks Nick in the room upstairs, which he sees from the window. But then she's like, oh, you were a flop, meaning like he had like whiskey dick and couldn't get it up, basically. So Yeah, and then that's when he's like, fine, I'm gonna end this completely. I have the last move, and it's I'm gonna kill our fake son. And he does it by saying, oh, he's dead. And because it's in their hands, he's able to create that narrative, and she has to unfortunately go along with it. And you see her fully break down, and then the couple finally realizes, oh, they're fucking nuts. Like, they've created this whole thing, and we've spent the whole night with these motherfuckers. And even though they have their problems, they kind of feel, you can see them kind of like the younger couple by the end being like, thank God we're not them, and maybe we can actually communicate better so we don't end up like these assholes. And, you know, because at the end, Honey's finally at the point where she's like, I want a baby. You know, like, she's like, let's go away from here. We can go talk and have our like relationship get better than these fuckers. But who knows what happens to them, because
But even in the film, their characters were not revealed, right? The secondary characters, like in the film,
Nick
there
and
wasn't any
Honey.
point. Yes, like I haven't like seen or I heard anyone saying their name, Nick and
Yeah,
Honey. Like I
Nick's
think it
name never gets mentioned in the
comes up.
play or in the film, and
Oh,
so it's just his name is Nick. That's all we know. And then Honey,
oh,
I think it is her name because that's like what Edward Albee said it was, the writer. But like the only like you hear, but that's also a name you just like say to your like sweetheart or something, like sweetheart, honey,
hmm.
babe. So it could be her name or it couldn't. We don't know. But yeah, you do find out little things about them, especially when George goes off with Nick outside and kind of reveals this story to him that happened with like this young person he used to know, where he accidentally killed his mother and father. And then you find out that George wrote a book based on that story that may have been his story, but we don't know for sure because we never get the direct answers because they're too busy playing games all the time. You're like, what's real, what's fake? We have no fucking clue. And even Nick doesn't know, but that's the way they kind of like get them to, you know, open up so they can use their stuff against them. But it's like, are you even telling me the truth, or are you just like trying to act vulnerable so you can manipulate us? And that's kind of what they do, which shows just how much like they're both fucking sociopaths. And it's wild because they're using these people as like chess pieces and like not even seeing them as people. And it's just a wild experience watching them just like go back and forth with each other. And I, you know, you look at it and you're like, oh, it's an old movie. It's like, but it's so much more than that. And it caught me off guard when I first watched it, where I was not prepared for the level of like intensity from beginning to end. Like, it doesn't let up. You're from the beginning to end, you're just like, what the fuck is going to happen? Is someone going to get hurt? George brings out a gun at one point and you're like, holy shit. And, you know, you find out that it's not a
it's
gun.
just
But there's that
it's
one moment
lovely.
afterwards where she's like, ooh, you got me. Martha's like, so like kind of turned on by the fact like, ooh, you did this like crazy thing. And then he's like basically like pushing her off, like, no, we're in the middle of a game, get your shit together. And then she immediately is like, okay. And you have them have these moments where they're like, it's okay, it's enough. One of them is, and the other one's like, no, we're not done battling in front of these people. And it's just sad. It's so fucked up and sad. And one little moment I love in the film that I just have to get out of the way is with Sandy Dennis, who plays Honey, who is just like, you know, this naive, like, oh, we're just together, me and my husband having a lovely time. And then you see her kind of like quickly, like all the way down, just becoming a hot mess. But there's a moment when she goes upstairs to like freshen up, and the camera is on her at the top of the stairs, and she's just standing there and like kind of getting herself together. And it's one of my favorite moments because it's just like, I've had those situations where I've been in like a room that like makes me uncomfortable. I'm not happy, and I have to kind of like, hi, how are you? Like, you know, go back into it. Like, it's very like this introvert thing where it's like, oh God, now I have to go out there and be a lively person so I can, you know, feel like I'm not in a certain, like, have them like concerned about me and that this is okay. And it's, I think, a moment that the actress was kind of like keeping, like getting herself ready, but it looks like Honey, the character, is like, I'm about to go out and walk into this crazy shit. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have to do my best. And then you see her like walk down the stairs, like a light switch, just like, oh, so anyway, blah, 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 blah. And it is the most like fascinating moment in the movie for me. I just, every time I see that, I'm just like, oh. And I think her character is just so pathetic and like, but also very sweet. And you just feel so bad for her that she's stuck in this marriage, but also like maybe manipulated him into staying with her by faking this pregnancy, or maybe she did have an abortion. We don't know. We don't ever really get that. It's just we hear that it's a hysterical pregnancy. So, which could have just been this thing that she was hoping for and therefore got bloated and like ate a bunch or something. I don't know, but it's yeah, definitely ruined their whole facade. But and they had to keep it going. Yeah.
So one another thing I wanted to mention, that in Mad Men itself, I think the second season, or yes, in the second season, there's a scene where like the ad guys present a clip from the TV series, a fictional TV series back in the 60s, that this is the clip of the TV series and we will be running this series, and if you want you can play the ad just right after the series ends, or sorry, I think it hits the commercial. So like in that fictional television series, there's a word called abortion.
Oh
Like
yes.
they repeatedly, the court and the judge and even the lead actress, so to say, in the television series, repeatedly tells the word abortion, and like multiply
Yeah.
sorry repeatedly. So the thing is, back then in television, these kind of things were a taboo in American societies, because like not everyone were a fan of these kind of stuff which was happening in I didn't have any much idea, but I feel these kind of stuff were like more happening towards in European cinemas.
Yeah.
So people were kind of didn't adapt to it back then, but I can like that scene kind of tells us that how American society was back then. That these kind of things were taboos back then. But then this film came, that and then a film called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf came. That okay, marriage is shitty. Marriage like sometimes becomes shitty, and these kind of things do happen in a marriage, and like it kind of is a landmark film for all those marriage films which like we see. I think Noah Baumbach's films from Noah Baumbach, it's The Squid and the
Oh
Whale,
yes.
and even from even A Marriage Story as well.
Yeah,
So
which he took from Bergman. So I'm like, okay. Noah Baumbach annoys the shit out of me. I only like Squid and the Whale, but yes, there is definitely a correlation between that, because it's interesting, because even in Noah Baumbach's films, he's like he seems to deal with a lot of like people that are well off. They're like well off financially and are in a place where they have to be a certain way or present themselves a certain way. And even in like Scenes from a Marriage, like the beginning of that, they're having like an interview with a magazine about like how wonderful their marriage is and how things are, and but they also like have never, it seems like they've never been asked really about like what it is, and they're just kind of like giving them answers that they want to hear in a way, or they haven't really fully processed what they're saying and how shitty it is. And even with this, when it came out too, I think it threw people for a loop, like Scenes from a Marriage did. Scenes from a Marriage, everyone was saying that when that came out, it like it drove a bunch of people to actually get divorced, where they're like, oh yeah, maybe we don't have to put up with this stupid bullshit, because we went headfirst into this in the wrong way. Like we've been told that this is what to do, and society has told us what to do, instead of us like building something that's actually organic with another person. We're doing it based on what society tells us to do, which is not good, because you're like forcing yourself into this box that's already been created for you that you don't fit in. And that's what I think a lot of marriages end up being, even like, forced marriages, like with family and stuff. Because even with Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, like her dad, who's the president of the school, maybe had a hand in probably putting them together. Or something, or it may have like, she might have done that to like, I want to look good for my father, so I'm going to marry a professor or do this. And like, it's all about like impressing other people instead of doing what you want to do, and actually going with someone that you get along with. But I feel like the two of them had a real connection at first, but then had to push themselves into this box that they didn't belong in, and in doing so, it kind of drove them fucking crazy. So then we just kind of see it. They've turned it into a game, and they've turned it into using their like anger towards society and the way they've been forced into and using it against other people because they can't deal with it themselves at this point. And it's sad to see, and but it is also fascinating to watch two intelligent people like this just go head to head and say these things. It's like watching a roast, like where they're just like roasting each other constantly, and it's like, wow, that's so mean, but that was very clever and very funny.
But
Like little things. Yeah.
and also it turns very physical at some point
Yes.
as well. Absolutely, like Rose doesn't turns very much physical. Like this
Yeah, he
shit
like
was kind of very
throws her
real.
over a table almost, or like tries to like, yeah, it's bad. And they have actual anger towards each other too, because they have been like eating at each other for years now, like just picking, and just like there's nothing left to them, and it sucks. So I even though I want to know like what happened afterwards, like where did their relationship go when they don't have that child they've made up? Like what do they do now? Do they actually face the bullshit that they've been suppressing for so long, or do they end up leaving each other? Like we don't know. It ends with them just kind of like with each other at the window, but they are kind of like consoling each other. So you see that there is a sort of love, and it's not perfect. I don't think any relationship is perfect. I think you have to just, it's something you work at, and they had been avoiding it for so long that maybe this time they'll actually have something to work towards, but or maybe it's too late. That's what's so great about the ending, is that we don't know where it's going to go, and
Mm.
but all we know is that we've seen the end of something. And I think that's with Honey and Nick as well. They leave having learned a lot about each other and a lot about relationships and love, and they could be done with each other as well. We don't know. So it's interesting that it could go any sort of direction afterwards, and I think that's fascinating. But
Absolutely. Yes. One final question I wanted to ask you, Matt. Like, did you enjoy other Mike Nichols films? Like, I think The Graduate as well, and Closer, or any other films?
I was like trying to think of the other films he's done. Closer was I think the first film of his I've seen. I'd have to get like a list out to see exactly what all he's done. I'm not really good at American cinema. I'm terrible with it. So like even like when I was like, and especially like older cinema. So even though this movie's not like super old, it was still like 60s, 70, I believe.
60s, 60s,
60s.
66, I
So
think.
yeah, so like when it like I don't really go back to a lot of like American cinema, but I'm trying my best, so give me time. But I did see Closer when I was younger, and I loved it. Of course, I saw it when I was like I think 16 or 17, and I was like, "Ooh, this is so controversial." But for me, it was like it was really cool because I hadn't seen anything like it, and that one has a lot of dialogue as well because it's based off of a play as well. So I think he does well of like with translating plays to oh, he also did he does this all the time. He did Angels in America, which was also a play as well.
Tony
um
Kushner's play. Yes.
yeah, so he like turned that into a thing. But he also did Wit, which was a play as well. I haven't seen the film version, but I saw the play. But Closer I loved. Angels in America I really enjoyed. Birdcage, which is like a classic fun one. And The Graduate I actually watched just recently for the very first time. I feel like I had seen all of the movie but out of order, and then I finally was like, I'm going to sit down and fully watch this, see where it goes. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I loved every bit of it. I love the ending. It also has a very similar ending where it's like they have this it's these two young people who end up together at the very end without actually thinking things through, and now they're left just with the bare bones of their relationship, and they're going to have to figure out where it goes. And this could be good or bad. And I think it's a very similar thing that happens in Closer as well, where we end with like these people have been fucking around with each other constantly, and at the end we don't really know where they're left, except for I think one character feels like the most like free, and that's the Natalie Portman character. But I think he's tackled relationships in a very exciting way. So I
So,
yeah.
quite an interesting point you made, and I wanted not you like I wanted some recommendations from you, since you have watched so much stuff in that space. So you have obviously watched pretty much like pretty good amount of plays on Broadway.
Okay.
So like, what's the greatest, like what's the better version of like, how, like I'll reframe the questions, like
Okay.
what are the good adaptations made by filmmakers from stage play to films, feature films?
I know a lot of people like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof with Elizabeth Taylor as well. Having seen a version, I saw the play on Broadway and Scarlett Johansson was in it, and which was really cool because I was front row and she was right there. But I think that play is boring, so I like, almost fell asleep. But they do lean into the character, I think, being more like homosexual, which I think is there, but they don't really go too deep into it with the Cat on a Hot Tin Roof movie. I think for the time, but when it comes to like adaptations from stage to
Mm-hmm. Correct.
screen, I would say musicals are the most impressive that I've seen
Okay.
personally. Because with plays, it can be a little weird because especially if it's in a like a single room, like even Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, like had they not left the house. I feel like they could have, but I think it was a breath of fresh air that the film maybe needed because like you can actually like explore a little bit more and open the world a bit more with the stage. Like you can't really go anywhere unless you move the set. But uh, musicals, I would suggest would be like Little Shop of Horrors. I think is the best. Like, which you know, there's no best, but I like for me, my favorite is Little Shop of Horrors, the musical made into a film, and I think that is the best like film musical ever.
Correct.
I will always stand by that. I think Chicago is great. Um, it's there's not like a ton I would say, but I'd say those are my favorites. My favorite play is Venus and Fur, and uh, Polanski, he made the film version and fucked it up. I was so mad
Oh,
because he did not. The play is so much better than what he put on screen. I was irate, but I'm glad it was attempted. I just wish someone else did it. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a bunch out there. I can't say I've seen a ton, or I can't really think right now. Normal Heart, I thought was fine, the film version, but the play was also much better. If you can ever see the play of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, seeing like that acting like in real life is just magnificent. And I saw the Broadway
mm,
revival with Carrie Coon, Tracy Letts, and uh, two others. But I saw that, and like there's two intermissions, so you get like 10 minutes in between like certain acts and stuff. But just the whole time, I went with people who had never seen or read it, and they were just like, "This is fucking nuts." And I was like, "I told you, it's amazing." I was like, "The play doesn't matter, like who's like doing it. It probably, I mean, it does, but like still, like you're gonna get something incredible from the dialogue in general." And I think even with like Closer, Venus and Fur, even the dialogue with that is still great, no matter how much they fucked it up with the film. But it's an interesting thing to like keep track of and see how people translate a stage play or musical to screen, because it's not always successful. And some people like, okay, let me get on one more thing. Like, what's his name? Who did Les Mis? Tom Hooper? Is that his name?
Yes, Tom Hooper. Yes,
Yeah,
Les
fuck that
Miserables.
movie. Fuck that movie. I was so I was like, this is not how you do this. Like, and I know some people like it, go enjoy it, that's fine. But I was like, nah. But I think people lose track of, especially with musicals, that this is a musical.
Actually, I
Yeah,
just wanted to cut you out. Like
yeah.
I just found out that the revival version of the Broadway play "Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf" was played by, like, the characters were played by Carrie Coon, Madison Dirks, Tracy Letts, and Amy Morton.
Amy Morton from the hit film Rookie of the Year, with the kid breaks
Okay.
his arm and he throws a baseball. The only sports movie I like because it's fucking stupid. But I remember her from that. I was like, it's the mom from Rookie of the Year. But it's great. Yeah. So
Hmm.
I don't know.
Okay.
Wait. Yeah.
Yes, yes, you're saying
I
something.
was just gonna ask, have you seen like a really good like play like that, like in like theater or anything? Okay. I
Yes,
was
so we do have plays in Hindi, but obviously, like the plays thing, the Broadway thing in India, there's no such thing as Broadway. Oh, there's a Broadway play, like the opening night and like stuff like how we see in Birdman
Mhm.
or many other films as well. Like how the scene in New York, how the scene of Broadway in New York is like if an actor is doing a play, it's okay, it will run in like couple of theaters over here, that's
Okay.
it. Like it's not kind of a thing which happens with feature films. So because I think because of stuff like Tony Awards in US, there is some kind of push for American theater as well. But here there is no such kind of hype which is created for theater, for plays. And like we don't have musical, like that many musicals and films
Okay.
in like in theater plays. But we do have musicals and films. I think you have learned it from films like Lagan as well.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
films
great.
from Amir Khan. So yes, we like the musical concept in we have in the format of films, not in
On like
like in stage
stage.
plays. That's
Oh,
right.
cool.
Yes, but I would definitely love to see some kind of plays in the near future if I
Yeah.
visit your country and watch plays like The Sound of Music and
Oh yeah.
other musical and play Broadway plays
Yeah.
as well. So yeah, that would be fucking great
And
to watch those.
last question, who is
Yes.
your favorite like who is it, was there any character in the film that you happen to maybe align with a little bit more, or someone that you kind of saw yourself in, or even like appreciate a performance more? Was there anyone that you were kind of rooting for like in this situation, or anyone that I guess you found the most fascinating? Is there one character that you kind of I guess flocked to more out of the four?
But to speak to you the truth, Matt, I actually was rooting for their marriage as per the characters.
Okay.
But I loved both, like Elizabeth Taylor's and Richard Burton's performances,
Yeah.
like how they were just throwing dialogues back and forth, like how they fighting. Like it felt very much like a stage play, how a stage play would have been. And I just found out that they both started their careers with I think I don't know about Elizabeth Taylor, but Richard Burton did start his career in doing Shakespearean plays back in his hometown in Welsh, so in Wales, sorry. So he is kind of an experienced actor doing these kind of plays where there is very much dialogue, heavy dialogue around. So these are actors with so much experience with, and they can, like, I didn't feel any surprise by how did they pull off this kind of great amazing performance. So yes, I did love performance by Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
Yeah.
So yes, I am yet to see their other films as well, like you just mentioned, a cat on a hot tin roof, which had Elizabeth Taylor. Let's see how that plays out as well, because it is based on a play by Tennessee Williams.
Yeah, who I have difficulty with, but I'm like, okay. Uh, and yeah, George is a character that's like a dream for me to play when I get older in a play. Like I want to play George so badly. I've wanted that since I was younger, and I'm like, well, I gotta wait several years before I can do that, or film the whole thing in black and white with old makeup on. So we'll see. But I loved Sandy Dennis in this. I love her, like, I dance like the wind in the bar and stuff like that. It's just fucking nuts. And I think she goes all out as much as she can in that, and she kind of gives them a run for their money as well. And George Siegel's good. He's just kind of like he's the easier one there, I guess, because he has to be like the man. He doesn't do too much. But I love Richard. I love George and Martha when they come together at the very end, when he brings the flowers. They're like, flores, flores, the muerto, and they're like, oh, you're a houseboy, and he's like, I'm no houseboy, and they're like, I'm nobody's houseboy now, and they like just break out the song together. I just think that's really cute. I just had to like throw in a last little bit of there because watch the movie. If you've never seen it, you have to watch it from beginning to end. It's incredible. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yes, thank you so much, Matt, for coming to my podcast. Like I feel we should do this kind of podcast very often, but we aren't getting any mutual films to discuss. I think
Oh, I know.
if you watch something, I won't be able to watch those films, and if I watch it, you won't find it so much good to talk about in my podcast.
It
So, but
depends. We might have a crossover again like this. I haven't been watching as much, but I luckily the new cinema like near me is playing a lot of like classics and other things, so I'm trying to go see as much as I can when I can. My current job is pure shit, so I'm trying to get out of that so I can have more time to enjoy life by watching movies. So
that's
hopefully
great.
soon. Yes, but I
That's
would love
great.
to do this again. Thank you again.
Absolutely. All the very best to you as well. Like watching all those classic and like rare films, restored films you just mentioned as well.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt, for coming to this podcast. Finally, I hope we will again discuss something very much soon. So
Yes.
yes, let's hope to meet you sometime later as well. Okay.
Yes, I would love that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good